let's move on to our next fireside chat, which is about risk and resilience. My guest is Vineet Khanna. Vineet is the former Senior Vice President, Global Head of Supply Chain at the world's largest food and beverages company, Nestle. Hi, Vineet. How are you?
Hi, Sean. I'm fine. Thank you very much.
We're delighted to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Where are you speaking from today, Vineet?
I'm based out of Switzerland, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, I'm speaking from London. But we have an audience worldwide tuned in here from all different time zones and continents and countries. And so, we're going to be chatting about, supply chain resilience and how supply chains can move with the times, which are, very turbulent, have been very turbulent, don't show many signs of becoming any less turbulent in the near future. And of course, this is something you've had long experience of, isn't it, Vineet, as a former supply chain chief for one of the world's largest companies. You must have seen it all over the past couple of decades.
Yeah, quite a lot, Sean. But just to briefly introduce myself, I recently finished my role of Global Head of Supply Chain at Nestle just a couple of months ago. Overall, I have 37 years of experience in the industry, global experience in different functions, in different locations. So I normally say 25 years in supply chain and procurement, and I normally say 12 years preparing for that because I had the chance to work in finance, sales, manufacturing, and technology before I started the supply chain role. I live out of Switzerland with my wife Minu and our dog Molly. I have 2 kids. Not kids anymore, they're grown up. My daughter lives in London and my son is studying at UC Berkeley in the US. Passionate about 2 things. One, bringing supply chain and procurement to their full potential, and I will talk about that a little bit. And secondly, about the cause of improving the life of the underprivileged people, those who are living in, let's say, poor circumstances, and how can we help them and come up in life a little bit. So these are the 2 things which I'm passionate about.
Yeah, but that came through loud and clear, from reading about your background, Vineet, and I also read how you feel that resilience on a personal level is about reinvention and creating new futures, as you say, for yourself and maybe for the people around you. But on a enterprise level, an organizational level, can businesses take the same approach to managing and evolving their supply chains to meet the challenges that they face?
I personally think so, because when I talk about risk and resilience, first of all, I prefer the term resilience to risk management, because my experience in life has been that for growth in life and your career, you need to be solution oriented and bring solutions to the table. So I don't like too much talk about risks. I prefer to talk about resilience. And first thing in the resilience strategy, which may sound philosophical to some people, but I think it is not, because it's very fundamental choice, is that how do you define resilience? In some cases, and in most instances, people define resilience as coming back or sort of surviving. The inherent meaning behind that is how to survive. Whereas if you look at the evolution and the biological perspective of resilience, it is the definition of how do you adapt to the changes and evolve and thrive in a new context. So it is important for business to make a very fundamental choice that are we talking about just surviving disruptions, or are we talking about preparing the business in terms of its capability to evolve in the new circumstances and succeed and thrive? So a lot of changes, for example, and some of the call it positive changes can't be called disruptions, like artificial intelligence. Just from the month of January to now, in 5 months, AI has evolved a lot, and we are seeing it a lot more. in the next 3 to 5 years, its impact on the business models, in my view, will be profound. How well we are prepared for that? How will it impact our business model? What kind of changes are we ready to bring in? Or for some cases, sometimes the channels change quite a lot. Suddenly, the e-commerce becomes 40% of your business from 10% before. So, how do you adapt to that? So, for me, the mindset of resilience has to be not just survival, but about being adaptable to see how we can evolve and and uh, and thrive in the new circumstances. That's a fundamental definition of resilience from my viewpoint. As I said, it may sound to some people a play of words, but these are two different roads. To me, it's a fork in the road, and you need to choose what are you talking about, because your investment strategies, your operational strategies, and your culture and people focus is going to be very different depending on which road you're talking about.
And it's an interesting point you make about the goal you've set yourself now and this new direction you've taken of helping businesses develop supply chain to its full potential. But I'm just curious what full potential looks like, Vineet, because full potential today was quite different to full potential pre-pandemic, wasn't it? Which in turn was different to full potential maybe 5 years before that.
Yeah.
So, what will full potential look like in 5 years' time, and how will it evolve over time? And how do companies continually address their supply chain issues and improve resilience and adaptability,
Right.
and so that their supply chain is operating at its full potential?
Right. Sean, this is a big topic. We don't have full time, but I'll try to state my top line thoughts. It's going to be rather high level. First, good news, which all of us as professionals understand, is that because of the COVID, the focus on supply chain and procurement has become more holistic. What do I mean by that? It used to be a lot about cost efficiency and service before, which is still very important, will always be important for the business. At the same time, the agenda became holistic because there is focus on agility, there is focus on resilience, and also there is focus on sustainability, both social sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. But that's good news. But even that for me is positioning of supply chain and procurement, that we talk about you when there's a problem. COVID was a problem, and then therefore supply chain and procurement came into limelight. I'm talking about moving to the next stage. And let me first of all propose the top line of it and then try to explain. The top line I state is that I often hear supply chain and procurement people talking about a seat at the table. It's a very common expression. My proposal is moving from seat at the table to leading the table. Now, for some people, it will sound provocative. Now, first of all, let me clarify what do I mean by leading. Leading does not mean you are the boss. Leading does not mean you are the most important person on the table. Leading is a responsibility where you are saying that you're going to orchestrate all the resources, all the flows, the flow of physical products, cash flow, capital flow, information flow, take into account all constraints that you have, also taking into account the multiple objectives we have today. For example, sustainability and resilience and agility. And how do you deliver all that together, which is good for the whole, good for the business, good for the society? Why do I say this? I often use a quote of Victor Hugo, who says that nothing has more power than an idea whose time has come. I think supply chain and procurement's time has come because businesses have multiple objectives today. They have just not the growth and profitability, they have a responsibility to the society, responsibility to the planet, and to different stakeholders. Plus, you have a lot of the objectives can be achieved only by working with the entire system, your T minus 4 supplier down to your customers. You have to orchestrate the entire network to deliver these objectives. And thirdly, there are a lot of risks and challenges. Now, it's the DNA of the supply chain and procurement function to manage this whole lot together. And if we don't take that approach in the business of managing this whole lot together in a holistic fashion and optimizing everything, businesses will not be able to deliver their objectives, and it will not be good for the business. It won't be good for the society. It won't be good for the planet. So, what I mean by 100% potential is making sure that the supply chain and procurement way of looking at the business, which is holistic, end to end, orchestrating the entire network, becomes the way the business is run. And supply chain and procurement is not seen as one function. It's not one function. It's the way the entire business model needs to be designed and run. I wish I had more time to explain this, but therefore I say from a seat at the table to leading the table.
No, you've done a fantastic job of explaining it in that short space of time. So, it's right to separate out procurement from supply chain, isn't it? When you're having these conversations, because they are two distinct functions, even though they're part of the same organism as such. But just going on to the role of the chief supply chain officer. You were a chief supply chain officer for many years, like you say, for one of the world's biggest multinational companies. You must have seen many changes in that time. But what do you think has been the biggest change in that role that you've experienced, probably since pandemic times? What elements are in that role now that weren't in the role, say, 3 years ago?
Yeah, as I briefly hinted at the beginning, Shant, the role has become much more holistic because the moment COVID hit, suddenly the topic of resilience became very important. It's not that the cost was not important, but resilience became very important. But not only operationally, it became a strategic topic, making sure that what do we do in terms of the strategy to make business resilient for long term. I often say that you cannot make a skyscraper earthquake proof after it has been designed and built. It has to be built in the design of it and the way you're constructing it. Same goes for business. Resilience cannot be a Friday afternoon thought once you've done everything. It needs to be built in the strategy. So when you're making choices about your manufacturing network, your distribution network, your supplier network, your route to market, those fundamental choices need to be built. As an example, if you have a manufacturing network which is leveraging on economies of scale, by definition, this is also vulnerability of scale because you have few sites with huge production and something goes wrong, then you have a problem. So now you have to make a choice there that what kind of manufacturing network I want to go for. So certainly the resilience topic has become strategic. And I think one of the things that's important for the supply chain and procurement leaders is to make sure that you elevate it to where it belongs as a strategy and elevate it to the board. And my advice there is be bold. One of the things which often our community is not necessarily good at, we're good at working, good at numbers, etc., is being bold in putting the cost benefit on the table. Because resilience is not just about surviving, it's about the success of the business model in the long term. So we should not shy away from elevating this to the board and presenting what are the elements of resilience, what is the investment required for that. Certainly, you have to sell it, but at the same time, what are the benefits for the business? Because if you don't get the support from the board on the resilience agenda, you'll be struggling with every cost, every investment, and sort of working in the background trying to make it work, which won't be very successful. So obviously, it has become more strategic. There's a window of opportunity for us. I also think that there is the agenda of agility and sustainability has also become important, and we need to leverage it as one agenda together. As an example, I think this community understands very well that you want the transparency of the upstream supply chain, not T minus one supplier, but tier two, tier three, tier four, etc. When you invest in that, it serves multiple purposes. Obviously, it serves the purposes of resilience. At the same time, it is also instrumental for your sustainability agenda, both the social sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. So, how do you leverage this together and present as one solution which is addressing multiple concerns of the board? Resilience, agility, sustainability together, which makes it easier for you to get support of the board in terms of investments, in terms of solutions. So these are positive developments. At the same time, this window will not remain open for long because often businesses succumb to short-term pressures and things change. And as the pressure of COVID has eased off a little bit and there is more inflation, if we are not a good leader and if we're not communicating and articulating properly, it is possible that some of these agenda items can slip back into the background and we sort of come back to the old ways of working. And therefore, I keep on talking about supply chain and procurement leading the way and bringing the right topics on the table and leading the table for what is good for the business for long term as well, apart from the short term results.
So I'd be interested to know, Vineet, what was your approach when you were at Nestle to securing buy-in at board level for to help make the company more resilient in its supply chain? How did you sell that to them?
Uh, Look, Sean, as a matter of sort of call it policy or whatever, I don't specifically talk about Nestle because I talk more like an industry professional now. But let me share a few thoughts uh, which work. First of all, I said it already that it's important for you to have a good idea of what part of your portfolio you want to make resilient. You cannot have the entire business covered with all sorts of risks. You need to say, okay, these SKUs, these products, these geographies are my bread and butter. And it's very important to have a very differentiated resilience strategy for specific part of the portfolio. Otherwise, you will not look credible to the board. You will look like somebody who's just guy who brings all the problems on the table and is asking for tons of money. So first of all, make sure that you're talking about saying that, look, we have looked at the portfolio. This part of the portfolio we want to bulletproof because this is critical for the business. And when you take a class SKU for a CPG company, for example, you want to make sure that every material for that is covered. It's not a question of A class materials. It's a question of starting with A class SKUs, and the smallest of material there can cause your supply to stop. So start with the differentiated strategy for your portfolio. Also be clear about what are you bulletproofing. Is it market share? Is it volume? Is it profitability? What are you bulletproofing and how will you go about doing that? Obviously, it's important to present some numbers that this is the risk, this is the impact of that. But as I said before, be bold in presenting numbers and learn a little bit from our sales and marketing colleagues that they are a bit bolder in presenting numbers sometimes. So let's be bold on that. Third thing which I think works is to propose pilot solutions and say that we will do a pilot, we will come back to you, and if it works, then we will scale it up. Don't go with the big budget which says I need $100 million for doing this, because that's very difficult to approve. But a pilot always gets approved in my experience, that yeah, this is what we should do, and if it works, then this is how we're going to sort of proceed from here onwards. So these are some of the things which work for me. Of course, talk about some structural elements, which is the network, as I talked about, some operational elements, which is making site-specific BCP, etc. So that those are obvious things. I'm not going to state that. Also talk about investment in technology, and maybe we'll talk about it if time permits later on. But that's an important element. So these are 2 or 3 points which I think help in selling the agenda. Last and not the least, always talk in the business language. I always believe that any supply chain procurement professional will be successful if she or he is a business person. So start with consumer and customer always. The definition of what is going to work for consumers and customers, what's our competition in the marketplace, what's the language of market share. So the presentation should be more like a business presentation, and nobody should even realize, if I'm exaggerating a little bit, that you are a supply chain and procurement person. So it's the business context which is very important to sell the benefits and the cost to the board.
And I mean, that's the board, executive level. But I mean, all of these big transformation projects, I mean, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of referring to them as technology projects, but really at heart, they're people projects, aren't they? Because if you don't bring people along with you, then it doesn't matter what technology you're using, it's unlikely to be successful. How do you, in your experience, how do you take teams with you when you're transforming and you're looking to build resilience, or to whatever it happens to be, whether it's in procurement or supply chain? How do you bring people with you, Vineet?
Very important question, Sean. I wish it had a magic key kind of an answer, but I can share my experience with you. My experience is that you need to have a simple and inspiring message for the team on how you want to bring them along. For example, in my career, I've always used consumer as the center point of all the discussion that we have. We work from consumer and customer, and we work back from there to see what the business needs to do, so that every person who's doing a job, a person doing materials planning, for example, needs to know that I'm not doing materials planning. I'm making sure that a mother will get the product on shelf when she needs it. If I'm the person buying it, or if I'm the person transporting it, I need to know what role do I play in ensuring that the quality of my product is good for the consumer at the end of the day. So I always started with a statement called there is only one moment of truth in business. And that one moment of truth is not when you declare the results of the business. That one moment of truth is when a consumer is making a choice whether she's going to buy your product or she's going to buy the product of the competition. So you need to choose a uniting message which is inspiring, which is simple. At the same time, it puts the job of each individual in a context which is bigger than the immediate task at hand. And once you're able to inspire the organization with a common message like that, it becomes easier to communicate why you're changing things, why you have a transformation program in place, and whatever is being done. I'm not saying it's very simple and easy because it takes a bit of time. What it requires, however, is authenticity in leadership. And I can't emphasize that enough. Because when you're talking about such messages, they need to be very authentic. And once people are united behind a common purpose and a message, it becomes easier to work. And I think all of us experienced in COVID. I think most organizations experienced that people came up to a level of performance which was unprecedented to make sure that the products are available on shelf for consumers and customers, because everyone was motivated to say, okay, let's make sure that products are available on shelf. So that example tells you that once people are have a simple and inspiring message which puts their work in a different context, it becomes easier to carry out transformation project. Having said that, there are other basics. We won't have time for everything, but really taking care of learning and development strategy and putting processes before you bring in technology, of course, those becomes very, very important.
We're nearly out of time, sadly, Vineet, but probably got time for just one more discussion point, briefly. Now, Nestle is a huge multinational enterprise. I don't know how many tens of thousands of vendors you have in your supply chain, but did you learn much from your vendors? I mean, it's not always a one-way street, is it? Was that like a two-way learning experience for Nestle and your vendors?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. And I think that's true for not only Nestle, for most organizations, that this relationship with the suppliers is a very integral part of the resilience strategy. I often say, for example, you cannot knock on your neighbor's door at midnight if you've not talked to them for the last 2 years. Similarly, you can't just go to a vendor suddenly and change the quality of relationship if you are very short-term oriented and cost-oriented before that. So the nature of relationship with the vendors is a very integral part of the resilience strategy, which also includes, to your point, learning from each other. There being a partner in the innovation, there being a partner in giving solutions to ensuring reliability and resilience. As an example, the transparency of the upstream supply chain, you can't do alone. It's a mega effort. It involves the entire supplier community to work with you so that you can establish the transparency of the upstream supply chain. So the short answer is yes, you learn, but as I said, the quality of relationship with the suppliers is a very fundamental factor in how are you setting up that relationship. Is it short term and cost and extraction oriented, or is it something more than that? I'm not saying it's a charity organization and we just keep on embracing each other. It's business after all, but still, you can have a quality of relationship which is built on mutual trust, on collaboration, on planning, on execution, on innovation, on transparency of the upstream supply chain. There are a lot of areas of collaboration, which, by the way, applies to customers as well. Same thing to be done with the downstream customers. It's not only the upstream part.
Well, Vineet, I'm afraid that's all we have time for now. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of our virtual audience worldwide in saying that, and we wish you all the best with your new venture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks
Vineet.
everyone for participating.
All the very best to you, Vineet. So that's Vineet Khanna, former Global Head of Supply Chain at Nestle.